Doomloopers, and welcome to another episode of the Doomloop Dispatch, the show that covers the worst parts of the San Francisco Bay Area. And my name is Kevin L. Jones. With me usually is D. Scott Miller, but sadly he's got kids to watch. He's got to put them to bed and stuff, and we're doing a late episode because I've been waiting to talk to this guy for such a long time. This is Kalimah Priforce from Emeryville. He's an Emeryville City Council Member and is really involved in the fight against YIMBYs and gentrification. And he's been very active on social media, and I watch him and he says all the right things. And so I've been so excited to talk to him, especially to talk about Emeryville. Emeryville is as far as the Bay Area goes, it's kind of a forgotten city. It's kind of this interesting city because it's 13,000 people, but it's still so much a center of the East Bay. And but also too, it gets sort of a bad rep. There's a lot of people that want to make it out to be the most dangerous city in California, which I want to say I've never run into any danger in Emeryville ever, and I've spent a lot of time there. So it's a really interesting to hear the truth about what Emeryville is about from a man who would definitely know. So thank you so much, Kalimah. Why don't you introduce yourself and talk about why you got into Emeryville politics?
Sure. So, well, thanks. I'm a big fan of the show. I'm one of the first people that when you go live or it uploads on YouTube, I check it out because I think that your voice is one of those rare voices that really just deals with some of these issues around how do we thwart this distortion that is constantly happening in our cities, and this narrative that is heavily corporate sponsored that focuses on let's tell people that the block that they're on is scary, so they'll move out and then we can buy it. Right?
Yeah.
And so folks like us, who are talking about, hey, you know what? It like being in the city is worth sticking around for. That upsets them. And so and that's what my job is to do my job is to just to upset the status quo. So my name is Kalimah Priforce. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. And it is so funny because I was at the California Alameda County Democratic endorsement, and someone came up to me, elder white woman who's been in Democratic Party for a while, and she says, Kalimah, your values are so amazing, but some people, they don't like sometimes the way you say things or the way you do things, and I said, well, ma'am, I'm from Brooklyn, and you all knew coming where I come from, that I was going to be different. And it's trying to be different in sort of a sea of politics that wants everyone to fit into these sort of generic boxes, I think is the challenge for someone like me who comes from a tech background, who comes from an education background. My day job is in philanthropy, and that actually might even change, and we'll talk about that later. But the coming from my background and then deciding to go into politics came from simply just having my bike stolen. Having my bike stolen here in Emeryville, and then connecting with my neighbors. And my neighbor said, well, we need some sort of like organizer. We need tenants to be organized here. And I said, yeah, that's great. Yeah, you know what? I'll catch y'all later and see. And they were like, no, we wanted to be you. We heard that you're the kind of person that makes things move. And and I went, all right, let's have one meeting. And ended up being an entire organization, a tenant board, and eventually becoming Emeryville's first tenant union. And we had council members come speak to us renters. That's never happened before. in Emeryville's history. And they said the nice things, John Botters would come around and he would say, really nice things in a nice way. But then when it came to actual delivery, we didn't see the needle being moved. And so when a seat came up, I said, well, yeah, we definitely should have support somebody to run, and then everyone's like looking at me like, yeah, and I'm like, oh man, I really want to be in politics. I really want to be a politician. Do I really want to be in spaces with people who I would not hire when I ran my tech startups, when I ran my tech companies? Do I really want to be in those spaces? And so then I said, okay, you know what? Let me give it a shot. And so I went through all the hoops and hurdles of doing it, and then I won. I won big, actually, in a 5-way race. I was the top. I was 5 percentage points above the second place winner, and it was 2 seats. And yeah, and I became council member, and I've been raising hell ever since.
Yeah, that's awesome. And when you ran that campaign, what were the issues you were hearing? What were you hearing from your future constituents the kind of problems you needed to handle that people like Bouders was ignoring?
Yeah, so a lot of it is it's a demographic shift, right? I think that when Bouders came into power, Ohio boy who came into Bay Area, and and he kept needling at the power structure here, and he said some right things, but it was to a powerful homeowner base. And then Emeryville has now become much more renter oriented. And so in terms of our population, I believe now we're 60% of the population. And that wasn't the case 10, 15, 20 years ago. So now that the demographics have shifted, some of the priorities folks are thinking of, like, public safety being one of them. I had to address that. I had to address tenant protections. We have the worst tenant protections in Alameda County.
Oh wow!
And so
I'm guessing no rent control, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, no rent. Well, and here's the thing: Emeryville had the option to put in rent control just before Costa-Hawkins was erected, but we didn't do it. We decided not to, and then we didn't follow up with tenant protections. So, for example, I'm a below market rate tenant, so I'm a BMR, as they say, and we have no protections. We have no protections whatsoever. And the way that the state has it is that the state goes, okay, we'll cap it at 10, general 10% a year, right? Which is which can be a lot. But we'll cap it at 10, and then we'll leave it up to the cities to figure it out. The cities, we'll leave it up to them. And so what happens then is that if you've got like NIMBYs, running the city, they jack up the rent. If you've got YIMBYs running the city, they jack up the rent, right? And so it's like, we're in between, and we're going, what the heck? And so Emeryville did not do anything. And so it's unfortunate when I hear from BMR residents who think that just because they're in some sort of low-income subsidized housing that they are somehow protected in any way, that there's somebody in City Hall who has a portfolio for every BMR tenant, and we don't have a whole lot of them, and is saying, well, I am here to protect that person. No, that's make-believe. We have one person on housing in the entire city, and with the understaffing and the workload, then people slip through the cracks. So public safety, tenant protections, and I think our education system, that for a city with a high median income per family, people expect more from our education system. And there's a lot of things that we just really haven't done in Emeryville to support our school board and our teachers in our schools when it comes to that. Yeah, so and all these things I've addressed even within the 2 years that I've been in office.
Oh, wow. And with the school and education issues, has that anything to do with property taxes? Because California, of course, is screwed over by Prop 13. So commercial properties, which Emeryville is full of, don't really have to pay market rates. And while there is a small population, they still deserve good schools. Is that a big issue with it?
So what I've seen is that there isn't enough what I call public-private partnerships. And private can range anything from big corporations. For example, Emeryville is the home of Pixar, right?
Yeah.
Emeryville is the corporate headquarters for a grocery outlet. Emeryville is the corporate, and so we've got a lot of big companies that are here to nonprofit organizations. I remember the Harvest Festival that I attended while I was running. We had several booths from different groups, and I kind of like looked around and I said, where are the nonprofit organizations?
Oh.
Well, it's because Emeryville makes it so unaffordable for nonprofits to even exist in Emeryville. And so when you don't have that public-private partnership, when you're dealing with those kinds of laws on the books, then things tend to fall apart. And coming from New York, the crime in New York, the fallacy in New York isn't that we don't have great schools, and it isn't that we don't have great schools that low income young people, low opportunity youth attend. We just don't have enough of them. Right. And so even when it comes to the brilliant schools, why is it that we only have one Brooklyn Tech? Why is it that we only have one Bronx Science? Why is it that we only have one LaGuardia or Stuyvesant, right? And so it's because I'm like, there isn't a demand for more? And so that's the issue with New York City schools, as opposed to here, where the gap between public and private is much wider. And so in New York City, the great schools are the public schools. If your kid couldn't get into those great public schools, then you sent your kid to private school.
Yeah.
And so, which is very different from here. And so when you got the kind of laws that are on the books that creates that kind of disparity in terms of what gets funded publicly, then you need public and private partnerships. And that hasn't really happened. And so one of the first things I did when I became chair of our community services committee, which also oversees our education facilities and our schools, is how do we create a Promised Neighborhoods program in Emeryville for the first time, right? How do we do that? And it's been a 2-year process of getting that ball rolling.
Oh, okay. Well, great to hear. I'm glad you're making some progress because, my wife was in teaching for education. She's still in education, but now she helps educators kind of find side hustles or move on or find inspiration to keep teaching, because it really is that kind of work where they are so dedicated to it that they want to stick with it. They love it, but then the money isn't there and there's so much frustration. And her biggest battle is the system itself.
Yeah.
And that's why you got to find just any other way. It's like, while I have my issues with charter schools, I understand the need, you know? I mean, I understand the need. And so you got to find any way to work around it. So it's great to see you making that move. I do want to get into the YIMBY stuff because it's true. Emeryville is almost like, it's so funny. It's like I would say the canary in the coal mine in YIMBY politics and stuff. I mean, because before anywhere else in the Bay Area, a massive skyscraper, a massive apartment building went up in it. And, there's definitely there is a build there. And it's so interesting too, with it being such a corporate hub, that there isn't more residents and they haven't been having more people live nearby. So can you get into a little bit of the history that you've especially that and what you've seen? Because also I've seen these big skyscrapers, but I also know of communes in
Mhm.
Emeryville
Yeah.
too. So it's a
Yeah.
it's a whole cornucopia of living
Yes.
spaces.
Yeah. 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 I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing that Emeryville went from this being the rotten city. Like there's the book, The Writers Come Out at Night, and I believe in some of the beginning chapters, they name Emeryville as the rotten city, right?
Yes.
Rotten city, and because of the level of corruption, and a lot of those book rules are still on the books. A lot of those things are still there in Emeryville, which is one of the reasons why Emeryville has been ripe for corruption. Uh, Emeryville eventually began to become a refuge for artists. We had so many warehouses, so many spaces that as our industrial zones sort of began to become empty, artists filled in who were being kicked out of Berkeley and Oakland and other places, and they felt like Emeryville could be a refuge. So we still have a huge art culture in Emeryville. Artists sometimes aren't quick to take out the torches and be the kind of activists that we need them to be. I mean, it's amazing when we do get artists who do become activists, but most times they're like, hey, I'm just paying rent, and so I'll just let the corrupt person who's in charge, sort of run the show. And so Emeryville has had that. And with that level of corruption where people have been in office for 25, 27 years, Kim Bogowski is famous for running over someone and killing them and then still, running for office, right? And so Nora Davis, and so there's all these like history of Emeryville where there are no term limits, right? Because of that corruption that's on the books, right? And so yeah, and then you got cycles, and right now we're in a barter cycle, right? And that's lasted for about 10 years of corruption. But I would say the last 20 years, with the rise of Bay Street and Emeryville has been. I'll give you the name that I was supposed to when it comes to Emeryville. When I got into office and they have you go through your orientation. In Sacramento, League of California Cities, and I would meet people, and I said, "Oh, I'm in Emeryville," and they go, "Oh, the sellout city," and and so okay, so I'm from Brooklyn, right?
Yeah.
And so immediately, like my brow starts to sharpen, and I don't care who you are, where you come from, don't talk about my city, right? Like, and so so I say, what do you mean by that? Right. And then they go, oh, I'm sorry, I don't mean to offend, because they can tell, and they go, well, this Emeryville is a city that says yes, green lights to developers, right? And then think it's brilliant and smart for doing that, right? Like, oh my God, we're so pro growth, right? And it's just like, no, you just said yes. You just said, yeah. I mean, that's not hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oakland can say yes to everything. Berkeley can say yes to everything. Well, Berkeley does say yes to everything now, but it's any city can say yes to everything. And then next thing you know, we've got pollution, we've got children dying, we've got everything. It's not hard to say yes. And so it's being able to go, you know what, let's make a deal and let's see if we can work something out where there's value being created on every front, right? And this is my business background. So Emeryville most times doesn't do that. We just say yes. And then that's how we've created this disparity in Emeryville, where renters are like clamoring to stay in Emeryville with the lack of tenant protections, and there's our senior citizens are worried about some of our issues as it relates to public safety, and there's just so many different things. But Emeryville is definitely the crown jewel in the YIMBY crown. It's the best proof of concept that YIMBY has, because they can't do Vancouver. Look what's happened in Vancouver, yeah. Right? Houston. And I mean, come on, let's go what happened in Houston. It's just like every city they go. It's just like I always say whenever I listen to libertarians, right? I'm like, give me your proof of concept, right? Like like take over a town and then show me where your concepts, actually work, right? You can have a whole Ayn Rand statue right in the middle of town if you want to. Just do it, right? And so, and, and then it's like, well,
Yeah.
but so yeah, and then when you have that, but then when you see all the issues that are happening in Emeryville, it also shows you the limits of YIMBY's power, because they couldn't keep a person like me from being in office. They couldn't stop Mia and Calvin, Mia Esperanza Brown and Calvin Dillahunty, who are running for a city council to be my colleagues. It can't stop them from showing up. And so I think it shows you that YIMBYism, when it's tested, it tends to fail. But what do you expect from this next wave of gentrification that's been rebranded?
Yeah. And it's true, it has failed. And Vancouver is a great example now that it's all coming out, And then Houston, I love that you cited Houston, because my brother-in-law lives in Houston, and we talk about all the time how awful it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really, he's just like, yeah, I'll admit it, I've never been anywhere in East Houston. And it's like, East Houston is huge, and it's where you can afford to live. But you know what? It's all messed up, and it's truly like it is the YIMBY Shangri-La, because there's no regulations on anything, and nothing's old. There's no buildings with history, and it's just, and they just build everywhere, anything they want to. You'll have a gas station next to an elementary school, next to a strip club, and that's how they like it, And it's and then just a few miles away are oil refineries going nuts,
Exactly. As long as it's bikeable. Yeah.
Exactly. And then that's the thing. And it might be bikeable, but you'll also be flooded.
Exactly, right?
If it rains too hard. But it's so true. That is the whole thing that everyone forgets within these narratives with YIMBYism, about the kind of protections you lose when you accept this upzoning narrative.
Yeah.
And Houston is a perfect example. But let's get into John Botters. Now, he is currently running for Alameda County Supervisor.
Yeah.
And he was, I don't know how long he was mayor for Emeryville, but he was a weird character. He's a weird character from my point of view, because I swear, I think his whole identity is, I bike. And that's it. That's like it. That's like all I ever hear. Like him is like, yeah, and I bike, It's like, all right, whoop-de-doo. Like, that's it. Like, that's going to be your thing. But you're seeing more of these YIMBY politicians be that way, where it's just like, I mean, biking provides this kind of faux progressive shield, or like cloak, Oh, look, no, I bike. See, I care about the environment. And it's like, well, actually, no, you're kind of a tool for gentrification. I mean, if we talk about upzoning, you talk about the hard infrastructure for biking. I mean, that's when you're getting into gentrification, because that stuff's not going out to the outer edges. That's all going by the new developments and everything else. But so John Botters, what have I been missing about him?
Oh man, well, I call him the Manchurian candidate for in terms of like being a sort of progressive appearances, but in actuality there is a fiscal conservative sort of Ohio-esque way about him that you can call him weird. I just call him one of the most uninteresting people in the room. And because of that, he exerts this level of control over everyone. Everyone says, oh, well, he's nice. Well, he's nice until he realizes that you are not caught in his sort of spell of actually seeing him for who he is. And so a lot of folks in Emeryville have called him a narcissist, and I'm not a psychotherapist to describe his mindset and why he is the way he is, but what I do know is that what I've seen is bullying. What I've seen is and I actually shared a clip from 2 city council meetings where a resident is addressing the way that he silences people, particularly me. And then and in a part of the clip was the video of him actually doing that. And if so, a lot of those folks who are thinking about city council, how people function on city councils, you can look at Nikki Boss's those videos that come from council meetings, and then you can look at what happens in Emeryville, and you can see the clear difference. John Barters is good at running meetings, right? He likes to run. He he literally got an award for running meetings. And so he's like that, right? And running meetings, meaning finding ways to quiet people, silence people, and try to get through them and make them as short as possible. Which is great for someone with a legal background like he does. But for any other industry, there is a creativity and an inventiveness that is important when you're trying to test new ideas. And John Barters, or even when you're dealing with dissent, or you're dealing with, you've got to be able to manage. You got to be able to manage the room, but there's a difference between managing and control. And he is that. And so, and of course, I get tired of Emeryville being lied to. Right now, Emeryville is in a budget deficit that is about a little more than 10% of our annual budget. And so that's because somebody knows how to manage a meeting doesn't necessarily mean that they know how to manage money or be able to make money. And so I think that with the issues that pop up in Emeryville, that those who have aligned themselves with John Barters, they want the good of John Barters, which is pro growth. We got new buildings, we got but how many of those buildings are actually for low-income families? How many of those are actually for? And then when you look at the numbers, Emeryville falls far below those. And and when you talked about skyscrapers, he even tried to build this 600-foot tower. He tried, and then it got shut down. He tried to build here, it got shut down by the community. Got here. He's had a lot of failures. And he rides on the successes of people who came before him, and even people like myself. Right now they're riding on some like a lot of my public safety work that I've done, whether it's use of LPR technology, or it's working on a substation in Emeryville. And so and I'm trying to do it in the most humanizing way as possible, because a lot of my work in politics, off politics, is fighting dehumanization. And so trying to make sure that we do things the right way. So for example, by having this license plate reader technology, essentially cameras in Emeryville, that we have a citizen oversight, right? That the substation that we have that I'm working on is not just for increased police presence in South Emeryville, where South Emeryville tends to be ignored. That's where most of the lower income folks are. That's the seniors are, folks of color are. But it's also to help in terms of disaster relief. And so we've got everything focused on the area where people have their condos, but we don't have it in the places where I think people need them the most. And so having a substation there rather than a full-blown police station, it allows for, it's kind of like one of those Star Wars outposts, right? It's like you got to have something there to sort of let people know, hey, this area is safe, and then that helps to deal with conflicts that are happening, because it's also where our liquor store is. It's also where a lot of businesses that have liquor licenses want to open up in Emeryville, it's including a dispensary that we had that got ran over, and they were trying to find a way to reopen that. And so that the neighbors feel that these businesses can still exist because of that substation. And so, and the fact that, in case there's an emergency, a hazard emergency, then they're also covered. And so, but he's claiming that, a lot of my council member colleagues are claiming that, and this is what they do. And YIMBYism, when I first got into politics, and so I'm a different type of politician. Because I consider myself a progressive populist, right? Like, and when I say populism, one of the first heroes. So I grew up in Brooklyn. I grew up as an orphan in a group home system, and when I had a hunger strike against my group home in order to get books into our group home library, and that got the attention of a community of Buddhist monks and nuns. And so I had a formal education with a Buddhist monastic community from the age of 8 till I was about 14. And so I was introduced to so many different things. And one of them was a person who became one of my heroes, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. And Dr. Ambedkar, one of his famous books is What Congress and Gandhi Have Done to the Untouchables. And I remember reading that as a kid. And so here it is that I'm in school. It's the 80s and 90s, and everyone considers Gandhi a saint. And I'm the only one saying, yeah, but he didn't look after the untouchable. He didn't look after the Dalit people, right? And everyone's like, what are you talking about, dude? And so there's this like view of progressivism that sometimes can be a bit divorced from what I call the community. And so trying to marry the issues of the community and with progressivism has been a lot of my work, so that the Dalit people, however that manifests throughout our society. And right now in Emeryville, it's the renters, right? It's especially the low-income renters, that the people are ignored as you're chasing prosperity. So Gandhi is great, but my hero has always been Dr. Ambedkar. And so growing up, and then eventually it became Shirley Chisholm, right? Because I went to the Shirley Chisholm Daycare Center, and so I learned about Shirley Chisholm. And so my politics is like a mix between the two in terms of influences. And then you got I'm a highly spiritual person. So eventually I converted to Catholicism, and so I'm a Buddhist Catholic, choir boy on Sundays. And I'm actually on the pastoral council of my church, St. Columba Catholic Church, which is a historically Black Catholic parish in Oakland. And so when you got a mixture of all these different things, then my focus has always been, how do we get back to dealing and addressing the needs of the people? And that is definitely not the mission statement of YIMBYism.
No. They try. Oh, just listen to us and we'll solve your homeless problem. We are listening to you, and homelessness is getting worse. There's so much of that. We just had all these issues with police, and you guys are pushing for more police. Like, we don't want that. What is that? But it's all because it's about urbanism. It's about and honestly, people, please read the book Capital City by Samuel Stein, especially the discussions of new urbanism and what gentrification is. It's not, it's not as simple as this was like a poor area full of people of color that we pushed out. No, it's a much more complicated, nuanced thing. And it seems like John Botters is getting such a huge push because he is willing to be that face of YIMBYism, and because he's got proven results, apparently, you know, or at least results he can claim, right?
Yeah.
But so you bring up the crime issues with Emeryville, and it is interesting because of a city that's it's about 13,000 residents, but apparently a lot of crime. But from what I could tell, it's property crime.
Yeah.
And that would make absolute sense because it's literally a big chunk of it is like a shopping center, honestly, like a lot of it. And the thing is too, is, you know, the discussions of smash and grabs and stuff like that. A lot of people, especially during the pandemic, wanted to try to make that a recent phenomenon. It is not. I have been covering the Bay Area for decades. I was covering this in the early aughts. Smash and grabs is just a form of burglary, basically, you know, and it's just a way to do it, especially with these techs, you know, with Apple stores, just putting the stuff out there for you to grab. Of course, they're going to figure out a way to do it. Now, but that being said, I mean, so am I right to think that while there might be a lot of crimes reported, the city being the most dangerous is a false narrative?
Yeah, well, yes, of course. I mean, because for a while, this side of the Bay Area, we were the only IKEA, right? San Francisco eventually opened their IKEA. We were the only Apple store in, there was no Apple store in Oakland, right? There was only Emeryville and Berkeley. I mean, where's the Best Buy? The Best Buy is in Emeryville, right? And so a lot of our stores are in, and so that's where you go for that. But it's also so this is the interesting thing when you go into deep dive about some of these crime statistics and the failure of YIMBYism. This is what happens when you leave corporate landlords to operate in an unchecked manner. So corporate landlords, when they're unchecked, when they are not afraid of the city, when they're not afraid of the city council, they'll say, we're just going to hire these rinky-dink security guards to, and you know, and maybe they'll be around when something happens. And so you've got these, you've got, you know, my neighbors who are getting these Amazon packages, right? And we've got lockers and lockers of Amazon packages, right? Okay, the locker breaks down, boom, all right? So then what happens? You've got a ton of packages right there in the hallway, and it's Emeryville, right? And so we're one of the higher ranking cities when it comes to median income, right? I think we're like maybe 2 or 3. I think Piedmont is the highest, and so so you got that, and then you got, you know, our doors that, you know, anyone can go in, and so you got a lot of that, and then you have people who are willing to actually report the crime, right? Because crime statistics has everything to do with reporting, and so we will report the crime, and so our numbers are up there simply because this is what happens when you build buildings and you don't build the amenities to take care of the people who are in those buildings.
Yeah.
And so what happens is then you go into and I kid you not, I know stories of people who are paying market rate value for to place their car in garages, and then someone breaks into them, and they go to the property managers and they say, okay, can you give me the footage so I can provide to the police? And the property manager says, yeah, it's actually a dummy camera. We actually just have it there to scare people. Wow. Right. And so I kid you not. And so you know, like the stories of, and that's what happens. This is what happens when you don't take care of the buildings that you're building and the people that you're building. Now, you know, we place a bit more of a standard because a lot of my complaints and a lot of my organizing, there's higher standards for the newer buildings, but for those buildings that are sort of post that line where Costa Hawkins begins, and you got so some of the newer buildings. You've got a lot of buildings that are built in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s that they're being poorly maintained, and the value. One of the candidates who are running for city council, Calvin Dillahunty, he moved into Emeryville, into a building that we just recently built. So I think it was built last year, finished building last year. He moved in February. And right now, it was just announced that the building has been sold back to the lender. And so, and so he's like, well, okay, so we don't really have a landlord now, and so like, what's going on? And you're talking about like not the planning has been really bad. And then when the planning is that bad, it falls on the renters. It falls on even the single family homeowners, those who live in the homes that they own in Emeryville, to take up most of the costs. And so, and the police are, they've wanted someone for a while who can actually like deal with it, actually address it. And that's something that I've been working on. And so it's very different. I remember during I was at the Working Families Party convention in San Francisco, and we were all together in a group, a lot of us, Working Family Party folks, and they asked us, so how many of you are struggling, with your police departments and your police and, that sort of thing? Everybody raised their hand except for me. And I'm like, no, I'm cool. Right. And then, and then they asked me, like, how is it that you're cool? Right. And I was just like, well, we've got a Black police chief. I know him. He understands my boundaries. He understands, so the police are cool with me, but they know that if there's an issue that pops up, I'll be the first one to take out a camera. I'm like, yes, ma'am, please. Yeah, please. I want to record what you have to say. And then I'll take it to the police, and then, and they go boom, boom, boom. Right. And then, but before I make a public statement, I'll check in with them and I go, all right, so, what happened, right? And then they'll tell me what happened, and they'll say, I was like, okay, well, did you handle it this way? Did you handle it that way? Okay, all right, cool, cool. So even me giving them the benefit of the doubt and be able to say, okay, you know what? Let me know what is, and that's the thing, is because if you were to poll Emeryville residents and their feelings towards Emeryville police, it's very high. We think very highly of our police. A lot of police, they take lower salaries and fewer benefits just to work in Emeryville.
Oh, wow.
And so because they don't want Oakland, right? They don't want Berkeley. They don't want to be, because the last thing they want is to be, they have in a squad, or they have, a partner who's just like, hey, let's go rough up some Negroes, right?
Yeah.
And then like, it's like, wait, what? And so, and that's the thing, is it's like, they're just like, no, I don't want that. I want Mayberry, right? I want Smallville, right? And so Emeryville, and so my whole thing is just like, okay, we take care of you, you take care of us. And the moment there's a bad cop, or there's the moment that somebody had a bad day and they shouldn't have been on their shift, let's get on top of it, right? And let's work together on this. And so, and I think that sometimes we as liberals and progressives, we are so quick to make this line of demarcation when our police force is becoming more Blacker, browner, more women, more differently able, more veterans, more that sort of thing, right? And so there's an opportunity there for us to finally get to a humanization framework that works for everyone. And one of the first things I did when I joined a public safety committee, I actually read the police manual. That is like a 400-page manual, right? And so I read it page to page. I even thought about doing a Twitch broadcast, right? of just like me reading it, right? Looking at comments like, what is this guy doing? Oh, he's reading the police manual, right? And just like reading it, right? And just going from page to page, right? And there's a lot of antiquated language in it and there's a lot of stuff in there that I'm just like, okay, but but my whole thing is, how do we start talking to one another to create the kind of progressive policing? And that's when you talk to our police chief, when you talk to our police captain, when you talk to our lieutenants, they use the words progressive policing. Okay. And so, if Emeryville is, I think, a proof of concept of anything, it's definitely not that YIMBYism works. It's that progressive policing is possible. And I think that is a lot of my work has been towards doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I never hear of quote unquote officer involved shootings, in Emeryville, and there's definitely never protests against the officers. So there's a lot to be said there, and honestly, it's like, I mean, that is a great debate. I am not the most educated about police systems, but I have also I've worked, I've had to talk with your small town cops, and I've talked with your big city cops, and there is a difference there too, especially cops that are known in the community are treated differently and treat people differently because they can't escape it too. I mean, that's the whole thing. I mean, the riders, they were known, but thankfully they also kind of I mean, at least they tried to stop them, but that's the thing. It's true. It's that small town of policing. When the police are part of the community, it's you see a much more success. Now, so we're in this situation right now where it sounds like you're getting some turnover politically in Emeryville. John Botters is no longer going to be the mayor. He's going to move and try to be on the Alameda County Supervisors. So who are the new candidates that people should be aware of and worried about, and who are the candidates that truly deserve some support?
So a lot of residents in Emeryville woke up in the morning to a text from our current mayor, and and they sent me copies of it, and they were going, "This isn't true, is it?" And I'm going, I was like, "Yeah, no, this isn't true. That isn't true." And so Emeryville has had a lot of social media activity. One of the reasons why is because Emeryville doesn't really have the press resources like Oakland and Berkeley, right? And so you have the more independent journalism, and then you have like Berkeley side, and you have Oakland side, who are owned by City side, and so you've got a pick of different folks covering different stories. Emeryville, we have only two, really. We've got Evil Eye, and we've got the Emeryville Tattler. Evil Eye and Emeryville Tattler used to work together. Now they don't. And they are constantly at odds. And so they'll cover stories, and then eventually they'll start attacking each other, right? And so and I talked to both of them about this, right? And I'm saying, this does a disservice to our city, with you all going after each other and always finding ways why your publication is better than the other and those sort of things, when you guys meet different needs, and they'll go and then they'll go right back to attacking one another. And so because of that, there's not a lot of accountability. And so then you've got what I call like the high schoolers who are in the city council. And so you got these folks who to treat Emeryville politics like it's a high school prom sort of, yard sort of thing, where there's like, well, I don't like him, and so when I first ran, they because they're Democrats, I'm a Democrat or whatever, I had to go to them to get their endorsements, right? And I technically got their endorsements, but I got anything but endorsed by them, in terms of support. They were first excited about me because I think that they thought, oh, someone of his caliber being on our side, great, right? And then, you know, and my whole thing is just like, y'all do know that the seat that I would occupy, that's not my seat, that's the people's seat. and they didn't get that. They're like, no, wait, what? You know, and so a lot of the nastiness that's there and the cattiness that is there. I mean, anybody, you don't have to, this is my opinion. Just check their Twitters. Just check, you know, and so I'll give you an example. When I shared, okay. So when I shared that when I was asking for their endorsements, they wanted me to sign a collegiality pledge, right? I'm new to politics, so I'm thinking, okay, this is normal. People want you for endorsement. They want you to sign a pledge or something. I don't know. And so didn't know what was going on. And so they, and so the collegiality pledge was, oh, when you get into power, you'll agree to like get along with us and, you know, not be disruptive and, you know, whatever stuff that they were, whatever. And so, you know, and as a black man, I'm going, okay, that's very interesting, right? So I share that, right? What are the folks? Actually, both of them, Evil Eye and Emeryville Tatter, covered the story. Emeryville Tatter does it, right? And so Emeryville, Tatter says, hey, okay, this is what's going on. You know, Kalimah Priforce, Councilman Priforce, was asked to do this collegiality pledge. He's not with that sort of thing, whatever, right? And so, and then there's a lot of like loose facts, and then there's actually concrete facts, right? That's what you're going to get with a lot of our publications. And then when the councilman, who's the current mayor, then places on Twitter, excuse my language, she says, well, it's time for me to run up checks these facts, like I'm going to, and she calls him an F-boy.
Oh, wow.
A sitting council member. Right? Now.
Is it with the 2 C's?
Yeah. Now, everyone is like focused on her and how like ugly that is and how not representative of the city it is and that sort of thing. I'm smart enough to know that the person who's pulling the strings of all of these folks is John Waters.
Mm-hmm.
And that he doesn't attack directly. He'll do it through his proxies. and then he'll surround himself with like this, with this squad, this high school squad, who this is how their level of nastiness. And this has been the way that Emeryville has been run. As long as it keeps developers happy, right? Then let the drama ensue. And so I've come into this like, okay, I'm just going to be the adult in the room and just like listen to what the people say. And then, because there are times when I want to bring things to an agenda. There are times when I want to, like, for example, I'm Haitian American, and I have wanted to make a lot more of a statement around how Haitians are treated in Springfield, Ohio, and other cities because of the rhetoric from Donald Trump and JD Vance, and just in the Republican GOP. But I'll place that when it comes to priorities lower on the queue based upon what people have shared with me. Because if that person wants a dog park in that part of Emeryville, I'm going to mention that. If that person wants us to finally have land acknowledgement in Emeryville of the Ohlone people, then I'm going to mention that. If that person says they want this and that and that sort of thing, right? Because that is, to me, how I govern. And so when I see this stuff happening, then I realize that politics, the reason why corruption happened in politics is because people, rather than relying on when they get elected, going back to the people and saying, hey, this is what I've done. This is what I've been able to accomplish. Okay, what else do you want me to do? What do you want me to work on? Whatever. When you get elected, you don't look towards the people who elect you. You now look towards the top, right? You look towards the big names, political names. And so you're getting all these endorsements. And so the candidates who are getting these sort of big name, big party sort of endorsements, those are the candidates who I say stay away from.
Yes.
And Calvin and Mia are the most amazing people that I've met in Emeryville who decided that they're going to actually deal with these high schoolers, right? They're going to actually deal with this goon squad. They're actually going to deal with like these jokers and these people who are all about the drama and all about the I don't like him, and so they're going to deal with that. And so, and I think that is just really amazing. And I think that that if they are successful, when they are successful, so I'll share one thing. I'm sorry, I go on and on. I'll share another thing. So, this is a prime example of the politics in Emeryville. So, you talked earlier about John Botters being mayor. So, in Emeryville, we have 1-year mayors, right? Everyone gets a chance to be mayor, right? And you typically in the United States, small cities like ours, where you have this rotating mayorship, that rotating mayorship is codified. And so when you become elected, they let you know, hey, this is when you'll be mayor. This is when you'll no longer be mayor, and there'll be this person there and that person, whatever. Because of the corruption, the corrupt history of Emeryville, they've never codified it. And so, and of course, who takes advantage of that? A couple of years ago, when it was Councilmember Scott Donahue's turn to be mayor, the high schoolers decided, oh, well, we don't have a vote of confidence in him, since we're going through a financial hardship. So we want John Botters to become mayor, right? And so suddenly this rotational mayor is now broken. John Botters becomes mayor, right? So then, of course, now that the mayorship is elected and you control the city council, then what happens then next year? John Botters becomes mayor again.
Wow.
Right before there's a supervisor race, right? And so, and then what happens, right? When you look over his numbers as to the donors, his biggest donors, well, one is his family. So no matter what his orientation is in terms of his background and that, he was this queer youth who was kicked out of his home and everything. And I have a lot of empathy for that as someone who grew up in group homes. And so I essentially grew up homeless. But you did not grow up homeless and poor, right? And so if your family is cutting checks that not even presidential candidates get from their family, then you came from a well-off background. All right. So that's one. Two, you're looking at the real estate companies, the developer companies in Emeryville who signed off big checks, right? We have a cannabis company in Emeryville who signed a really big check. Why? Is because we made sure that he had very little competition in Emeryville, right? And so when we could have minority-owned cannabis businesses in Emeryville, we chose not to. And so here, all this his pocket's been lined. That's why he needed those 2 years. He needed those 2 years to establish himself financially, so that he could make this run. And so that's why he had this big head start with Nikki Bass. And so now, okay, he becomes mayor again. And so then they elect the next person, who should have been, if we were doing a rotation, it would have been Courtney Welsh, who's the current mayor, to be mayor. But in terms of vice mayor, who should it be? Well, it should be the person who has the most votes in that election, right? So it should be me, right?
Yeah.
No, they skipped me.
Right?
Yeah,
what?
they skipped me. Yeah. So this November, I'm supposed to be mayor if we kept the rotation. This 2 weekends ago, we had the Democratic endorsement meeting, and the question was raised: should the rotation of mayorship in Emeryville be codified? Calvin and Mia said no. I'm sorry. They said yes. They said it should be codified. When you elect somebody, you elect them because they have they should be a mayor, right? You elect someone, you say, okay, the rest of them, especially Mayor Welsh, said, "Oh well, I like our flexibility in Emeryville, right?" And so Mia stands up and is like, democracy is not flexible.
Yeah.
And I think that is an answer to your question. That is the thing that I'm so proud of them for, because when I sort of petitioned them to run, I said, the most important thing in all of this, my expectation is independence. Is that you are not here to serve me. You are here to serve the people, that the seats that you occupy are the people's seats. And so you are independent. And so, yes, I'm supporting you and I want you all to win, and I'll do everything possible in order to make that happen. But after you're elected, you owe nothing to me, right? We can't even have really conversations because of the Brown Act, like that. But no, it's about what you owe to the people. And if you honor that, then we'll definitely still get along. But if you don't, then you'll notice that I'll be the person that will remind you why we are here. And so I'm really impressed by Mia and Calvin. They're very brilliant. They're just amazing. They work really hard. And so those are who I'm pushing for. And it's a 3-seat race. And so let's say if Welsh or Sadiq Kar, if they win, there's still 2 more seats that Mia and Calvin can occupy. And if they are elected, then there's a good chance that then I'll finally be mayor.
All right. Well, all right. That's good. And we'll put their information in the comments of the show, because people should support them. And also people should know not to support John Botters. I mean, the people supporting the recalls in Oakland support John Botters. That should say everything you need to know about that guy. I mean, he is definitely in the wrong pockets. I mean, he shouldn't be in any pockets, but that is definitely the truth. This was great, Kalimah. I really appreciate you talking to me, man. We'll do it again sometime too. And maybe sometime we could go get a beer at Wondrous or something like that.
No problem.
I don't know if you drink like that.
No, I don't, because I'm a religious dude. But I'll definitely will have a ginger beer along with you. Yeah,
that's awesome, man.
And thank again for your amazing show, and keep going. And this is what you're doing is wonderful, and thank you for being a platform for voices like ours.
Yeah, it's honestly, there is a vacuum. Something's got to fill it. And so I try. So I really appreciate that. And everyone, you can follow us on social media. We're on X, we're on Instagram, we're on TikTok, and please support us on Patreon, and make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube. Thanks again, Kalimah, and to everyone listening, keep fighting the good fight.